Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we'll delve into innovative ways to transform traditional HR into a more human-centric powerhouse and explore how embedding HR within teams can revolutionize your company culture. All right, let's get straight into it.
Welcome back to Innovation Pulse. I'm Donna, and today we're talking about something that's going to make a lot of HR professionals uncomfortable. My guest is Yakov Lasker, who spent 15 years as CTO across 3 different companies, and he has a radical proposal that challenges everything we think we know about how organizations should work. Yakov, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Donna. And yeah, I'm about to make some people very uncomfortable.
So let me just jump right into this because you told me a story before we started recording that I cannot stop thinking about. February 2022, the war in Ukraine breaks out. You've got developers in Kiev. What happened?
One of my developers, a young woman, she gets out of Ukraine with 4 of her younger brothers and sisters, 4 kids. They cross into Poland, and I find out she spent the night in an office building because some kind owner let them in. They all have COVID. It's Friday afternoon.
Oh my God.
So I call HR. I say we need to get them an apartment right now. And you know what they tell me?
I'm almost afraid to ask.
They say they need approval from their manager, and since it's Friday, they can't reach him. They'll handle it Monday morning.
Wait, hold on. A woman with 4 children, fleeing a war zone, sick with COVID, sleeping in an office building, and the response is, "We'll get back to you on Monday?"
That's when I understood something fundamental. HR wasn't designed to help people. It was designed to manage resources according to process. So I paid for the apartment myself, organized a taxi, found a doctor, moved them in. Then I called my CEO, and of course, he reimbursed me immediately.
So the CEO backed you up, but only after you'd already broken the system to actually help someone.
Exactly, and this is what I mean when I say I hate HR departments. Not the people in them, but the entire framework they operate within. Because here's the thing, Donna, this wasn't even an employee. Legally, she was a contractor, but she was part of my team. I worked with her every day. She trusted me. And when she was in crisis, the system said she wasn't my problem.
Okay, so this is where it gets interesting, because you're not just complaining about HR being inefficient. You're saying there's something fundamentally wrong with how we've structured these departments. Walk me through your thinking here.
It starts with language. We call it human resources. Resources, like people are oil or lumber or computing power, things you allocate and optimize and manage for efficiency. And once you accept that framing, everything else follows. You standardize processes because you standardize resources. You maintain distance because you don't need relationships with resources. You enforce policies because resources need to be controlled.
But that's not how you see your developers.
I love my developers. I still fire them when I need to. I still demand improvements. But first, I love them and understand them and respect them. They're not resources to achieve company goals. They're people I'm responsible for. And I need someone in my organization who shares that philosophy and can help me take care of them.
So when you say you hate HR departments, what you're really saying is you hate the worldview they represent.
Yes. Every interaction with traditional HR was a reminder that the organization viewed people as means to an end, and I couldn't change that at the company level. But I could create what I call an R&D island, a place inside the company that operated by different rules.
An island. I love that metaphor. So you're building a different culture within the larger organization?
For 15 years, across 3 companies. And here's what's interesting. The CEOs were frightened by it, but happy with the results. Frightened because I was creating relationships and making commitments that didn't fit the corporate framework. What if other departments wanted the same treatment? What if this became expensive, but happy because my R&D departments worked? People stayed, they were productive. They trusted me enough to push hard when needed.
Okay, but let's talk about the organizational structure you're proposing, because this is where you're going to lose some people. You think HR should report to functional leaders like CTOs and VPs, not to the CEO or CFO. That sounds chaotic.
Why? Why should R&D and sales have the same rules and practices? They're completely different. Different bonus structures, different cultures, different challenges. The obsession with standardization drives me crazy.
But hold up, doesn't standardization protect people? Like if you give women in engineering 3 months of parental leave, but women in sales get 6 months, you've created a discrimination problem.
Of course, there's a baseline of legal compliance and basic fairness that needs to be consistent. Anti-discrimination protections, safety standards, core benefits you've promised everyone. I'm not arguing against that. What I'm arguing against is the standardization that says developers and salespeople should have the same performance review process because it's administratively convenient, or that training budgets should be distributed per capita instead of based on actual learning needs and return on investment. That kind of standardization is about HR not wanting to think too hard.
So you want HR embedded in your management team. What does that actually look like?
My management team was me as CTO, plus VP of R&D, VP of QA, VP of DevOps, VP of Product, VP of Data Science. Adding an HR person is natural. They sit in every meeting. They understand the technical environment. They know the people. They help with compensation structures, talent development, organizational design. They're a real member of the team.
But here's the question that's probably on everyone's mind. If HR reports to you, aren't you just going to tell them what you want to hear? What happens to independence and oversight?
This is where everyone gets tangled up in theory instead of looking at reality. The assumption is that managers need oversight because they might act against company interests or hurt employees. But if a CTO is fundamentally misaligned with the company or is a toxic leader, HR isn't going to fix that. The CEO needs to fix that. HR doesn't have that kind of power and never will.
Okay, so you're saying the independence is illusory anyway.
Worse than illusory. It's insulting. My team knows their criticism is welcome because I'm a high-quality manager. My CEOs knew they got honesty and the best solutions from me even in tough situations like downsizing. Why would I be in conflict with the company? And if I were, do you really think a junior HR business partner who the CEO doesn't even know by name is going to provide meaningful oversight?
That's a pretty devastating way to put it. The power differential just makes the whole oversight model absurd.
Exactly. And it gets to the core issue of trust and respect. The traditional model assumes everyone needs to be protected from everyone else. It's inherently adversarial. But in a well-led organization built on trust, that model just creates friction. I trust my people to do great work. They trust me to care about their well-being and growth. We don't need a mediator.
Let me push back on something, though. You mentioned firing people earlier. You said, I love my developers. I still fire them when needed. How does that work? Because that sounds contradictory.
It's not sentimental love. It's the kind of love a great teacher has for students, demanding excellence, holding high standards, sometimes being tough, but always from a place of genuine care for the person's development. You can fire someone you love when it's truly necessary, not because the relationship doesn't matter, but because you're responsible for the whole community. Sometimes individuals and communities aren't compatible. That's a much harder and more honest decision than managing out underperformers, as if people were just productivity metrics.
Most organizations are terrified of this language. Love, in a business context, sounds unprofessional, maybe even dangerous.
Of course they're terrified. But the alternative, the resources framework, is both inhuman and less effective. Developers who feel genuinely cared for and respected work harder, stay longer, take more risks, and create better things than developers managed as resources. The supposed professionalism of resource management is actually a failure of courage to build real human relationships.
Okay, so let's go back to your stories from the beginning. Because I want to understand how your model would have worked differently. The woman fleeing Ukraine with 4 kids. Under your system, what happens?
Under my system, I have an HR person embedded in my team who shares my values. When I call them on Friday afternoon, they say, I'll handle the apartment and taxi. You find the doctor, we'll sort out approvals on Monday. They understand that our people in crisis need immediate help. They have budget authority, and they're evaluated on whether they helped me take care of my people, not on whether they followed standard processes.
So it's about having someone with HR expertise who's actually part of your community.
Yes. And here's the other story that illustrates this. When Russia announced mobilization, my Russian developers were terrified. These were contractors legally, but they were integral parts of my development team, same as the local Israelis. They needed to leave urgently. I helped search for flights, convinced the CEO to pay high ticket prices. No help from HR. Nobody even cared because legally these were contractors.
The legal distinction gave them permission not to care.
Exactly. But I'm making people decisions constantly as CTO. Compensation, promotions, organizational structure, hiring priorities, retention strategies. Right now, I'm making those decisions alone, or with input from people who don't understand my domain. I need someone who brings expertise about people practices and who cares about the same people I care about.
So, what about the reporting structure? You mentioned they'd have a functional leader for professional development.
Right. They report to me operationally, day to day, but they have a functional reporting line to an HR leader who can mentor them, help them grow their skills, expose them to best practices. It's a matrix organization. The operational reporting line keeps them embedded in my community. The functional reporting line ensures they develop as HR professionals.
And the standardization question. How do you handle company-wide initiatives if every department has its own embedded HR person doing things differently?
Legal compliance, core benefits, anti-discrimination policies, those need to be consistent. But beyond that baseline, why shouldn't engineering and sales be completely different? They're different functions with different economics and different talent markets. An embedded HR person helps me design the right approach for engineering rather than force-fitting a generic model.
What about when the company needs to make a decision that hurts engineering to help the company as a whole, like budget cuts or layoffs?
Then the CEO calls me and we have that conversation. If I'm not trustworthy enough to participate in those decisions, honestly, I shouldn't be CTO. And if I am trustworthy, then I don't need HR to mediate that conversation. I'm a C-level executive. I've owned my own startups. I can build budgets. I understand trade-offs. How is HR going to do better than me here?
Okay, so here's what I'm hearing. You're not actually proposing chaos. You're proposing that we treat HR like any other specialized business function. Your VP of Data Science brings expertise in machine learning. Your VP of DevOps brings expertise in infrastructure. HR brings expertise in people practices. They're all part of the team, evaluated on results, expected to understand the business deeply.
Yes, that's exactly it. It's not radical. It's just treating this function the way we treat other functions. The radical part is the philosophy underneath, that people aren't resources, that leadership is about caring for people, not managing resources, that you can't separate human from resources and expect to build anything worth building.
You created these islands, these R&D departments that operated differently. But that's not scalable, right? It depended entirely on you being there, being willing to fight these battles.
That's why this conversation matters. I'm trying to articulate what it would take to build organizations where the human response is the institutional response, where caring for people in crisis is the default rather than the exception that requires a CTO to spend their own money, where HR people are partners in that caring rather than obstacles to it.
So what's the biggest obstacle to this model being adopted more widely?
It requires everyone in the chain to share this philosophy. You can't have an embedded HR person who genuinely cares for developers if they're being evaluated by a central HR leader who sees people as resources. You can't build a community based on trust if the CEO fundamentally views people as costs to minimize. The whole leadership team has to be aligned on what people are and what the relationship between leaders and their people should be.
And in your experience, how often does that alignment actually exist?
Rarely. I worked in companies where the CEO and CFO viewed people as means to fulfill company goals. I couldn't change that, but I could at least create my island. And since R&D worked efficiently and effectively, and yes, those are different things, the CEO was willing to let me operate differently.
Talk about that distinction, efficient versus effective.
An efficient system has clear processes, standardized workflows, quick decision-making. But in my Ukraine story, that efficient system was completely ineffective at helping people in crisis. My approach was less efficient. I made individual judgment calls, spent my own money, bypassed normal channels. But it was far more effective at achieving what actually mattered, which was getting people to safety.
So, for our listeners who are leaders in organizations, CTOs or VPs who relate to what you're saying, what's the practical takeaway here? Most of them can't redesign their entire HR structure.
Start by examining your own philosophy. Do you view your people as resources to achieve goals, or as humans you're responsible for? That clarity changes how you interact with every system. Then carve out what space you can. Build your island. Fight for training budgets. Make exceptions when people need help. Use your political capital to protect your people from dehumanizing processes. And if you have any influence on HR structure, push for embedding. Even if you can't change reporting lines, you can demand that HR people spend real time in your department, sit in your meetings, build actual relationships with your people.
And for HR professionals listening who might feel attacked by this conversation,
I don't hate HR people. I hate the system they're forced to operate within. If you're in HR and you've felt frustrated by policies that make no human sense, by being told to enforce standardization when you can see it's hurting people, by having to say, "We need approval" when someone needs immediate help, then we're on the same side. The question is whether you're willing to advocate for a different model. One where you're part of a community, not a distant administrator. Where your expertise serves people, not processes.
this has been a fascinating conversation. Yakov, thank you for being willing to share these stories and challenge conventional thinking about organizational structure.
Thanks for having me, Donna. And to everyone listening, next time your company talks about human resources, ask yourself whether they're emphasizing the human or the resources. The answer will tell you everything about whether that's a place worth working.
That's Yakov Lasker, and this has been Innovation Pulse. Until next time.
We've explored Yakov Lasker's critique of traditional HR departments, emphasizing a shift towards a more human-centric approach that integrates HR into teams and aligns with functional leaders for better employee support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.